Hi there, my name is Per Thorsheim and I am the founder of SecCon, the world's first and only conference about passwords and digital authentication. By day I work as a security evangelist for a Norwegian startup company called Secure Practice. And my work, my hobby, my obsession in life is passwords and digital authentication. And you might ask, what do I mean by obsession? Well, let me show you this. This is a short tweet exchange a couple of years ago that I had with Cormac Curley. I wrote that I have it verbally from him that I'm obsessed with passwords, and he responded saying, confirm, I have a healthy curiosity while Thorsheim is pathologically obsessed. And why this interest in passwords? Well, more than 20 years ago, I was working with penetration testing. And in a single engagement, in the first day of testing, I managed to gain access to a Fortune 500 company because one single administrator was using the word password as his password. And then I got access to everything basically inside the company. I spent quite a few years studying and researching passwords by myself. And the first thing that I want to talk about here is LinkedIn. In June 2012, LinkedIn got hacked, and I'm sort of the guy who broke the news on a global basis that this had happened. But the story actually started on Tuesday, June 5th, when I saw on Twitter a single message from CoreLogic, it's a pen testing company in the US, saying that something big is brewing. Now, I knew what this was about. There had been a breach, but we didn't know yet what happened. So I spent, 24 hours to look into it. I cracked a lot of passwords. I talked to a lot of people worldwide, and we found out that LinkedIn had been hacked. So I went to Norwegian press and said, hey, you got to print that LinkedIn has been hacked and you have to change your password now. They did. And in 24 hours, I had suddenly been quoted in like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 news articles around the world. Crazy story. Some fun facts that we found with the LinkedIn breach. We got access to quite a few passwords from there, and we made statistics about these passwords. As an example, we found that the words linked and LinkedIn were being used a lot in passwords. We also found that people used passphrases like, Liverpool, you never walk alone, and so on. We also found that in passwords, the most common color word being used was blue. There was also being used the word green and red and orange and purple and black and so on, but blue was the most common color word used in passwords. And this is not coincidence, at least the way I see it, because the main color of LinkedIn's logo is also blue. And fascinating about LinkedIn, this is not unique, but this is one of the more interesting stories in the world of hacking companies. In June 2012, they had approximately 160 million users. And in August of the same year, 2 months after the hack, they surpassed 200 million users. And 1 year after the breach, the stock price had doubled. So in a way, the lessons learned from this is get hacked, get rich. But it's not really true for all companies, but this was a very special story with LinkedIn. Many years ago, I had an amazing opportunity during a penetration test engagement. We had gotten access to more than 5,000 pictures being used by people on their access cards at work. And we also gained access to the passwords of all these 5,000 people. So one late evening, I was sitting with a friend and discussing, the results of the day. And suddenly, and I can't really remember who, but suddenly, we thought, well, we have the pictures of people and we have the passwords. Do you think that men or women have the best passwords? So what we stuffed all the data into a database and started analyzing. And how do we do that? Well, we had to categorize. So we looked through all the pictures individually of all these 5,000 people, We categorized them by gender, male, female, whether they had glasses on or not, their hair color, and also if they had any facial hair. For facial hair, we said, like on the left here, they didn't have any facial hair. They had a mustache, small beard, full beard, a Unix guru, which is like, a lot of beard and maybe crazy hair as well. And we also had the porn donut, which is essentially, having this kind of mustache like around your mouth. And for the hair color, we also said that, well, you may not have any hair on your head. You could be blonde, super blonde, brunette, redhead, or the distinguished silver fox. And with these data, we could analyze and find the results that we were looking for. And the results were maybe not so surprising, because we found that women prefer length. On average, women had longer passwords than men. On sort of the opposite side, we found that men prefer a wider selection, or higher entropy, as it's called in cryptography. But the Unix gurus, the guys with the big beards and crazy hair, they had the worst passwords. And sometimes when I, tell these stories, I also give out advice. Now, you have seen this, Password Keeper. It's a book where you can write down usernames and passwords and names of websites and so on. This is a, standing joke on the internet, like this is not a good thing to do. Well, this can actually be a smart thing to do. Because if you keep them in a book and you keep that book relatively safe, it's very hard for hackers anywhere in the world to get access to that book. They have to come home to you and find the physical book. On the other hand, doing this isn't too smart. The picture on the left was at a meeting I was attending, where somebody had written down usernames and passwords on a post-it note. And the picture on the right is when I actually purchased a new car a couple of years ago. And the car dealer, the salesperson, actually had a post-it on his wall with the username and password to log on to the system that he used to sell cars. So, well, I got a great discount, but I didn't hack into the system, even if I could, pretty easily. A problem with giving out advice is that people can very often misinterpret it. Very simple advice, like this one. What does this picture actually say? Does it say no smoking, safety first? Or did you read no safety, smoking first? A couple of years ago, I got divorced, and my ex-wife, who's a good friend of mine, she told me that, Per, you really need to get yourself a new hobby. You can't just be interested in passwords. And I said, well, I do have other hobbies as well. And she said, no, you don't. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Of course I have other hobbies than just passwords. And she said, well, what is it then? And I said, PIN codes. I mean, you can't be completely single-minded, can you? She laughed, and I'm sort of still single. But here's a little experiment that I did in the fall of 2013. I was visiting a school here in Bergen, where I live, and there were approximately 150-200 students here, aged 17, in the room. And I asked them to create a 4-digit PIN, and then I tried to guess what they had chosen. Among the girls, 1996 was the most common PIN selected, which is their year of birth. Among the boys, 1996 was the second most common PIN code selected, but the most common one was 1337. And to approximately 50% of you, you might not understand what this means. But if you read 1337 as letters, it says L-E-E-T, LEET, short for elite, which is an expression that you use when you're playing games with others and you get beaten because they are really good. Then you just type in 1337 for them. But as I said, the second most common PIN code selected by the boys was 1996. This is very predictable for people that you are using simple patterns. And the most common PIN codes in the world are those displayed on screen here. There's 1234, 0000, and so on. One that might be a little bit more difficult to understand is 5683. But if you do look at your phone, specifically the input for your PIN code, you can see letters down below the numbers. And those numbers that you see here, 5683, they will actually spell out the word love for you, L-O-V-E. So in order to create a long memorable PIN, this is a simple way to do it. Look at the numbers and look at the letters down below. Find yourself a very simple word, a password, a name, first name, last name, whatever works, which is very easy to remember, and you convert that into a PIN code. So the word Johansen, which is a very common last name in Norway, will be translated into the PIN code 56426736. Easy way to create a long, memorable PIN. And I'm sort of proud to say that, this research into PIN codes, the first time I did PasswordsCon was in December 2010. So it's almost 11 years ago now. And at that conference, I had Howard Smith from Oracle Corporation in the UK do the opening talk, and he talked about how people choose their own PIN codes. And what he said then is still valid today. It is very easy to guess. It's very predictable. So think about that the next time you choose your own PIN code. I also have some really great news for you. They are coming on the next slide. And with the next slide, I think you will be so happy that you may even, while at your home office, stand up and applaud this one. You will be cheering, and of course, feel free to type it into the chat field of this talk that you really enjoy this. Are you ready? Here we go. Mandatory and frequent change of passwords is not a good practice anymore. It decreases security, it destroys the user experience, and you probably knew this as well, is a waste of valuable time to keep on changing passwords again and again and again without no obvious purpose. This is based on many years of solid research from research institutions and public government organizations, publicly traded companies, and, well, myself as well, worldwide. And as a consequence of this, in 2016, I was asked by the US National Cybersecurity Alliance for World Password Day to help them write password recommendations. And these are my recommendations that I provide to, well, pretty much anyone. Number one, make your password a sentence. It should be a unique, single, easy to remember sentence, maybe something from your past, something from your childhood that is positive and easy to remember. And you can use spaces in between every single word. You should also have unique passwords for every unique account you have. And I know that is difficult. I have more than 500 accounts on the internet. I can't remember the passwords for all of them. That's why I have tip number 3. Write down your passwords. You can do it on a piece of paper. You can do it in a specific password book, or you can use a password manager. That's what I do. I'm using a password manager that keeps track of my passwords, that fills them into forms online automatically, generates passwords and so on. The only password I need to remember is my master password. But your mom, dad, maybe your uncle or grandma, maybe they are not that good with computers. You can advise them to write it down on a piece of paper. It's a much better option for a lot of people, and it is very safe to do. And number 3, wherever you can, use two-factor authentication. And all this madness from me about passwords is based on this, the value of a password. In the spring of 2013, Associated Press on Twitter got hacked. Somebody broke into their account and they tweeted out a message about explosions in the White House and that President Barack Obama had been injured. Now, this is false, but the consequence of this is that the Dow Jones stock index fell by $136.5 billion. And there was a Syrian electronic army, a hacking group, claiming responsibility for doing this. And that's the value of a single password for a single account on Twitter. And lots of people also come to me and they want to talk to me about password alternatives. They say, passwords aren't that good anymore, so maybe when you use biometrics as an example. Well, we can. Here's an illustration of my perspective of biometric authentication. It's very easy to bypass. And what a lot of people don't know or don't really want to understand or tell you is that biometrics is not a security feature. It's a usability feature that makes it easier to use your phone and your tablet and your computer. But it doesn't make security any better in most cases. There are also options available for software that can track how you type on a keyboard or track your mouse movements, and based on that, they can figure out if it is actually you using the computer or someone else. Now, this has privacy implications. Tracking like you type, as an example, may be used for marketing purposes to separate different people from each other. As a consequence of this, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine, Paul Moore in UK, created a plugin for Google Chrome called Keyboard Privacy in cooperation with me. And this will disallow websites from doing behavioral biometrics of how you type so they can uniquely identify you. It's good for your privacy. It may reduce security in some cases. I have also looked into Android lock patterns. I was actually supervising or co-supervising Marte Løge, who was an MSc student at NTNU in Norway. And she found that when people were using Android lock patterns, they would usually create letters on the screen like this. And their work ended up as a published academic paper, which was really groundbreaking in the worldwide. So I suggest to people that you really have to do risk analysis. And what is risk analysis? Well, risk analysis is to come up with different threat scenarios or weaknesses that you might have and assign a likelihood value and a consequence value to that. Let's say you're going to work and there's a probability that you may get hit by a car. Not a good thing to think about, but if you look at statistics, if you talk to insurance companies, you will find that very few people will be hit by a car or by a bus while on their way to work. So we could say that likelihood is like 1. It very rarely happens to anyone. And then you need to assign the consequence value as well, which is here on a scale from 1 to 5. Let's say that if you do get hit by a bus or a car, the consequences are going to be maybe 3 or 4, but 5 is like death. And chances that you will actually get killed by this is, well, it's smaller than just getting injured. So maybe you will find out, well, we will end up with a certain value here. Now, doing a risk analysis is like this doesn't have to be that difficult. But the problem is, what I've learned throughout so many years, is that people prefer to do their risk analysis like this. They don't really care, they don't understand until it's too late to figure out what's going on. So to conclude this, we are very predictable and hackers are exploiting that fact. And I would like to explain to you why, one more time, why you should write down your passwords. And for that, I have a short video to show you here. Dear Mom and Dad, if you are reading this letter, I have probably gone missing against my own will. Down below, I have written a list of usernames and passwords that you might need to find me. Accounts like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, and my phone account are here. Please try to find me as soon as possible. You remember that I love you. That is in an envelope named for emergency use only. Because a problem today is that we are not leaving enough digital traces after us for others to be able to find us. But electronic traces are becoming increasingly important to find people. So my recommendation for you is very simple. Take care of each other. Write down your passwords. Learn to trust others. And be safe. Thank you.